made all your plans before you knew.
Right. Well, I didn't make them. Someone made them for me.
Okay. Yeah.
I just tried to follow them.
Yeah.
And Idaho in particular has been interesting. It's this where we are right now is a very small town, and it seems there are two towns in one.
Okay.
It's fascinating. There's the Christian town, which is very orthodox, very sound, and then you've got the gay town, where you've got the trans pride rainbow flag sticking out across the high streets and every single shop window. It's really strange.
Right. All with the same zip code.
The juxtaposition, yeah.
That's really fascinating. Well, I did get those promo things. So we have the Romans commentary. Pastor Wilson's Romans commentary is free on Kindle, as well as C.R. Wiley's In the House of Tom Bombadil, both free on Kindle. So be sure to check those out and pick those up. I heard that, Calvin, you've been here for a couple of days and been able to have quite a few different conversations with folks. I heard that you guys last night had some really fun engagement
We
on.
put it all to rights.
Yeah, we fixed everything, I think.
Yeah. So I heard that the conversation went everywhere from the Crusades to apples, and so give us a little peek into that, and as much as you can say in public.
I can't say all in public.
You're in America.
We have a First Amendment.
The First Amendment. There we go. Feel free.
We have a
Feel
First
free.
Amendment.
Maybe not on YouTube.
Where's the
but
flame from? We've got a Second Amendment to back it up.
That's right.
there we go. It's right there.
Apples. So I bought some apples when I got out here. I love apples, pink ladies, and they didn't seem real. They were like toy apples. They're shiny. They're perfect. It was very eerie for me. And I understand this is what the market here likes. It's superficial. It's probably appeal. It's probably full of pesticides and wax and all kinds of stuff. But it was very. It exemplified the situation here and why make America healthy again is so important, because there's poison everywhere. You know, so much of the food that I've been buying out here is illegal back home. From the Mountain Dews to the candy that's not actually chocolate, it's chocolate flavored candy. Like everything is fake, everything is superficial, nothing is real, nothing is healthy.
But how did the apple taste?
It tasted okay, but it wasn't sweet, or it wasn't as sweet as it should be, because it wasn't real. And it's the same with I bought a steak, and it was bright pink. I didn't end up cooking the steak, because I couldn't bring myself to cook it. It didn't look how meat should look to me. But I suppose there's a different market here, and people expect a certain, like a bright pink steak is supposed to be a good steak.
And one of the interesting things came up is we had a farmer with us, big farmer type, and basically watching Calvin and him go back and forth. And the farmer was basically saying, because of all the regulations, I have all of this. I have just acres and acres of fruit trees. And the regulators come out and they're going to look at one box, and they're going to look at, they're going to take a peek at one of the grapes or whatnot and say, none of these will work. So I won't take these. I won't take any of these boxes. They're off the market entirely. And then this guy was saying, I have to pay $200,000, $300,000 to hire a crew that will go out and just cut all of the fruit off of the bottom of these trees, all of these acres, because none of, I've got to get rid of that so I can grow the kind of fruit they want. But this is perfectly fine fruit. It's just not up to the standards of the regulators, which is tied into the standard of the market. Right. And all of the fruit falls to the ground. And Calvin was talking about this would be, don't glean the edges of your field, have something for others. But it's impossible, because you have to cut it all down onto the ground. You're facing all sorts of regulations. If anyone were to come out and twist an ankle in a gopher hole, you're going to be sued. You're going to face all these different complications. So it's fascinating to see how basically all of the regulators just drive up the price. He's like, I'm selling my almonds for, I don't know, $2 a pound, whatever he said, and you're buying them for $10 a pound, and I don't get it. It's all marketing. Our greed has so overtaken us that we're actually paying for all of that.
So it'll be impossible until about 12 months from now.
Right.
And then when we
slash the regulations.
Fixed up, slash the regulations.
So there's two sides to that. So the farm should be producing local produce for local people. It shouldn't be a mass industry of hundreds of thousands of pounds shipping hundreds of thousands of kilos worth of produce across the world. It should be, look, we grow local potatoes for local people. And that's how it used to be. And then if you have left over, you give it to the local community. It's not all about making money. And the other side of that is education, in that if people are looking for the perfect size grape, perfect color grape, we need to educate people that actually the shriveled one or the smaller one and the odd coloured one is actually the sweeter one. It tastes better. We've got to educate people that the apple that's coated in wax isn't going to taste as nice as the kind of misshapen one that looks more natural. It's about what people come to know to be good.
If I might, given this conversation, have one of these perfectly synthetic chocolate chip cookies.
I bet there's no chocolate in that whatsoever.
No, don't tell me that.
Yeah, the title for this episode is "Winning, Winning, Winning." And one of the thoughts I had, or one of the questions I wanted to put to everybody here is, what's the best that could happen?
The best
that could happen. We're excited about plenty of things. People are excited about the health aspect of things, and RFK being officially named today in his title is exciting, among many other things. What are some positive signs that you see, and what is it going to take to make it the best 4 years and make these 4 years count politically, and then what can we do as non-politicians, as three pastors and a regular guy?
The thing that encourages me the most is the disruption that I think is going to happen. I think it's going to be creative disruption. The swamp is a very real thing. I believe that Donald Trump wanted to do something about the swamp his first time, but got played in multiple ways. He did enough to make everybody mad at him, but he didn't know the game that was being played. And the way he's rolling out his second administration indicates to me that he's been meditating for 4 years about what he was going to do, and he's doing it right away, doing it immediately. And it's interesting to me and encouraging to me that he is basically trolling the deep state with all of these appointments. And they're not in a position to do anything for a few months yet. And it's just, I'm going to do it this way. And it's going to be bumptious.
Are there any particulars that you're excited about within those appointments, and that you like the general trend? But
I like the general trend. And, well, I believe that you can't go as rapidly as he is without appointing the good, the bad, the ugly.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that there will be people in there that you wouldn't want teaching Sunday school at all.
Sure.
And people that are, there'll be people who let him down. There'll be people who are not up to the challenge and that sort of thing. Good, the bad, the ugly. But in the main, it looks like he is making appointments that are consistent with everything that he telegraphed in the campaign. No. Some of that, as pro-life Christians, we want to be prepared to oppose. But most of it, 80% of it, is just really encouraging.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, guys?
A tough. For example, Secretary of Defense. I like the idea of a strong military that doesn't get into wars. Right.
Yeah.
And instead of perpetual war, instead of constant, perpetual, ongoing war, I think this is going to be a projection of strength that keeps us out of wars. So that would be one example.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts, guys?
Cheating last time around has actually done him a favour. The opposition cheating has done him a favour because he's escaped their net. And if he'd continued from one administration into the next, he would have been stuck with appointees that weren't necessarily in his favour, that ended up stabbing him in the back. Now that he's had a chance to meditate and reflect, he has come in with the A-team. He's got the Avengers. He is going to disrupt. He's going to cut down from 400 plus government units down to 99. He is going to have a Secretary of Defense who is a strong man who believes the nation should be as fit as possible whilst restraining that strength in a Peterson kind of way. And he is going to make America healthy again by having all of these regulations cut that are in the wrong place, but put regulations in where they need to be. If yellow number 5 is poisonous, it shouldn't be on the food. In the food, this all makes sense. It's commonsensical government.
I wonder about the cheating, particularly in the UK. So, with your UK background and perspective, does the average conservative in the UK think that there was cheating, or is that is that just a wild?
The average Conservative in the UK would have voted for Harris, would have preferred Harris to get in. I think it was 56% of Conservatives wanted Harris to win. The average Conservative in the UK is a Democrat. But those of us who are awake see the graph of what the Democrats had, average 60 million votes every election until the last election where they had 80 million. Where's the extra 20 million voters gone? Well, they were dead at the time. They're still dead now.
The other thing to throw into this mix is that and this is God's providence, had Trump won in 2020, he would have been the president with a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House, and would have faced multiple impeachments. It would have been, with the fact that he was treated the way he was and did the comeback, he's got a Republican House, Republican Senate, conservative Supreme Court, and a mandate to roll, which he would not have had he not had 2020 taken away from him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I saw on Twitter some folks, including Megan Basham, have been pushing to have a copy of Joe Rigney's Leadership and Emotional Sabotage sent to everybody in the Trump administration.
Right.
I'm curious what everybody thinks that would accomplish.
Washington, D.C. is a paradise for grifters.
Okay.
Right.
Fair.
There will be people who were never Trumpers who are going to start saying, well, I've always respected how Trump stood up for himself. And you remember I said so at the time. There'll be people like that. There will be people who have been on his side the whole time, but are mainly in it for number one. There will be people who believe in his cause and are in agreement. There'll be co-belligerents who agree with part of what he's doing. RFK would be an example, but not the other part. So it's going to be a cobbled together coalition of very different people. And basically what we have to be ready for is the prospect of infighting, the prospect of some people. Well, actually, I need to take that back, because I think Trump had a lot of that happen in his first administration, and I think he's going to have very low patience for that the second time around, and is going to have more authority to just fire people. Just you're gone.
Yeah, and not only the cheating in 2020 has emboldened him, but also his losing in 2020. I think we've gotten a if he would have won in 2020, one of the things that would have been different is the vice president.
Sure.
And as much but Mike Pence, you can say a lot about Mike Pence, but J.D. Vance is a very exciting future, I think, for the party. One of the ways we've talked about this election and this time is that we're now members of a broad coalition, a really strange collection of people, and we all know. I mean, we have read Friedman, or we've talked about Rigney's book. His
Forgot to answer your question.
No, that's all right. But we're now members of a group of people who are all at some level pushing for different things, and so it's interesting to think of ourselves as being part of a group, but also how to win. The question of how to win in a group without being one of those people committing emotional sabotage, people who are just there as fighting over a piece of meat.
So the emotional sabotage is a great book to address people who find themselves fighting when there really is no excuse for it. There's no reason for it. So all the disparate elements that are there might be ideological reasons or political reasons for a debate to break out or a fight to break out. But where Joe's book would be maybe 2 or 3 crates of this book sent to D.C. There will be many people who really are on Trump's team, and they really are aligned with the other people in the office, which will not keep controversy from developing. So the central humanist idea is that we collide with one another because of differences. And so that's why they want to fix everything with food fairs and diplomacy and discussions and negotiations. If we just met with the Klingons and found out that they have hopes, dreams, and aspirations, and we can work it out. But all the conflicts that I've been in have been with fellow Presbyterians, post-millennial, Van Tillian. You know,
All the particulars are there, right?
Yeah, and that's all in Girard. That's all Friedman, which Joe distills in his book. And it's all in James chapter 4. Collisions happen because of commonalities, because of things we hold in common. It's like two friends, best friends, going for the same girl. That's what their similar taste is what causes the conflict. The fact that you've got 10 people who used to be roommates and good friends are now in the same department vying for the same promotion or this. And the fact of what they have in common is going to be the source of conflict. And that's where Joe's book would be most helpful.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Jared?
Yeah, it's interesting about the emotional sabotage. It was a massive problem with the woke movement and intersectional schemes. Trump seems to embody not being moved by that nonsense. Musk and Vivek, they both seem. I don't know if you saw the meme going around, but it's got Vivek and Elon sitting at the table, and they're both looking at you, and they say, "So, how would you describe what it is that you do here?" It's so good. And those are not emotional manipulation vibes. They strike me as people that aren't going to be played like that. It's a perennial problem. It's a problem for all humanity. That's why I think the book would be so helpful, like reinforcing something that they already get in a human, natural way, and kind of backing it up with Bible and kind of supporting it for when those infighting. It's still going to happen at an internal level. So I think that would be good. I wonder, you've mentioned maybe twice now, Doug, that you see maybe let Trump get going and then crash the economy. And I've thought about it's kind of in a different category than just. I don't think woke emotional manipulation is going to work. The conservatives are done with it.
Interdepartmental politics won't do it.
Right. But a serious event, a witch's brew like COVID, but maybe economic could come. And I'm wondering how to prepare both that administration and the populace for that kind of, like, if that comes, what are the principles that need to be in place so that we don't get waylaid?
I think the big vulnerability is economic. So our debt to GDP ratio is really bad, and there are people still in power who, connected to banks and the Federal Reserve and places who could fly the airplane into the side of the mountain, or who would not. I would not put it past them to do that, to have some disaster happen economically, and then say, "See, Trumponomics. That's what happens when you trust this man." So 6 months into his administration, I'm looking for some attempt to sabotage, not by political means, not impeachments, because everybody's done with that. I think it's going to be an attempt to have some sort of disaster from outside, and Trump's best protection against that is something I think he's already inclined to do, which is to slash regulations in such a way that the economy can outrun the sabotage. So if he said, "Look, we've got this pending economic disaster, we're going to slash every regulation that we can possibly slash," what would the American economy do without the bloat of the regulations? It would take off like an Elon rocket ship, is what it would do. And that, in that case, that scenario, it might outrun whatever they want to do.
And then that's kind of what you were talking about, Calvin, at least in previous conversations. I wonder if some of your talk about local communities and even having that be economic. So if you have, at a federal level, we need them to deregulate so that we can outrun the sabotage. But on the people's level, could we counsel people to really think about local communities like ours? You mentioned you're here and there's 2 cities, there's 2 towns, and it's a small town, 25,000 people, but there's clearly 2. And I'm a Christian. I'm prone to walk into my Christian brother's coffee shop and drink his coffee, rather than go into the rainbow flag flying coffee shop.
You don't want gay coffee.
I don't want gay coffee. And you know, what's with that? I think that makes sense when you're in Moscow and the line is drawn so clearly. But there's Christians that are scattered in the suburbs. I mean, they're all in these cities. You know, if you heard an American Christian saying, "Are you really telling me that I should have allegiances in the way that I go get a cheeseburger? Should I go eat Christian cheeseburgers?"
Even bigger than that, it's not just about where we shop on the high street, it's about which high street we shop on. So we need to get out of the cities. Cities are demonic. We're not made to live in cities. We're not made to live on top of each other. It's anti-creation. We're supposed to live in creation and tend to creation. We are the stewards of creation. There's no creation left in the cities. And so we've got to get out back into the rural areas, back into the towns and villages, where we're not on top of each other, but we are with each other, in communion with each other. But I think Pastor Wilson's absolutely right in the weapons they'll use against him. We saw this in the UK. They wanted a certain person to be the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. They tried to put him up against someone they thought he would win against, Liz Truss. He didn't win because the people didn't want the same person that the elite wanted. Liz Truss won. So what did they do to get rid of her? They tanked the markets. The banks, the big industry, they were all in collusion with each other to weaponize the establishment against her, and she was gone within a month or so. And so you're right in that the preparation has to be for these outside influencers, the elite establishment crushing with all the weapons at their arsenal.
And if we're on the game, really on the ball, we can have little hats made, make apples ugly again.
Yes, just proper apples.
Eat the wrinkled fruit.
Yes.
Pastor Wilson, you've done a lot of practical work in building a community here. Can you also elucidate a little bit of the value of Christian communities even when things might seem to be going well for us? If in a Harris administration, I think folks might have been clearer on the value of having a tight-knit community.
Yeah.
What's the value now? Is this obsolete?
Actually, this is the value. It's the value and the great danger, because Samuel Johnson once said that there's a great value in being hanged in a fortnight. He said it concentrates the mind wonderfully. and I think it was you last night at the Man Rampant thing, when what do we do? And you said, devote yourself to prayer. The believers in this country were very aware of what a disaster a Harris presidency would be. And we're thinking about it, we're praying about it, we're worshiping in terms of it. Very, very, and it was, God was very kind to us. We've been shown mercy that we did not deserve. The danger is that God answered our prayer and we might sit back and say, dodge the bullet. Yeah. We can go back to the way it was. Right. Well, going back to the way it was would be the worst disaster of all. It would be despising a mercy instead of taking full advantage of the mercy. God gave us a breather. He gave us a respite. This is nothing's fixed. Nothing is fixed. He's given us a moment. He's given us a beat where we can marshal our forces, think through our strategies, continue to pray, continue to plant churches, continue to plant classical Christian schools, continue to labor, organized, meet fellow like-minded Christians where you are. We have a lot of work to do.
Right.
Now is the time for Thanksgiving, absolutely, and continue those prayers. And we haven't mentioned, we've mentioned the differences of this presidency versus if he would have won or if he would have been allowed to win the last time around. But the major difference is the miracle. He was saved from an assassination attempt. Like, his life was literally saved. For what purposes, we can only speculate, but surely that will change his whole perspective, or we would hope that it would, that he would rule or govern or represent the people for the greater glory of God rather than for whatever motivations he had before.
Yeah, and that we need to lean into that particularly because there's a strange hesitancy among conservative Christians to acknowledge that. It sounds strange. It sounds to their ears.
Do you not believe in miracles?
Yeah, I know. It's strange. The very American Trump, a Trumpist kind of person, a MAGA person, will absolutely God saved his life. the kind of the Reformed who totally believe in God's providence over every molecule are going to be like, they're going to choke on it just a little bit. This is my read, because it sounds like you're being a Trumpist. Like, it sounds like you're going to be this MAGA kind of person.
Yeah.
But I would encourage all the conservative Christians, you're going to have to get over whatever that is, because you believe in the sovereignty of God. Okay. The man, somebody tried to assassinate this man and failed. Read the story, read the providence. If you, to your point, Doug, I think we are at a moment where it's great to be a conservative. The memes are the best. It's go fight win.
The golden age of memes.
It's like the golden age of memes. I mean, my wife and I are just loving these. And I mean, this title win win win. Is that what we did? Okay, so we're win win win, and all of that is good and Christian. All of that is gratitude. But there's a way to do it carnally. There's a way to do it in secular fashion. And let's face it, a lot of the people that are going to be at the high levels of our government still probably won't be worshiping our Lord on the Sabbath. Okay? So we need to read all of that and refuse to be put in a position where we have to choose one or the other, where we have to say, go, fight, win, win, or we can keep the faith once for all delivered to the saints. And we, for the sake of for the good conservative secularists out there that are going to be in leadership, I think we need to lean in and kind of pull them in the right direction by saying, and we need to have all of this kind of focused on worshiping the Lord and gratitude in this moment.
What are your thoughts? I want to hear everyone's thoughts on the Christian elements within the Trump leadership coalition. Go ahead.
So the to-be defense secretary, Hegseth, many people know him simply as the Fox correspondent, and they think, what? What? But he's a combat veteran, Army veteran, knows the military, and you've probably seen the pictures circulating of the swimming pool. Big Jerusalem cross tattooed, and Deus Volt on his bicep, and you think, okay, but it's going to be hard to put these things in a box, because one of the things I've been concerned about is the resurgence on the hard right or the dissident right, a certain tolerance for the bad kind of kinism or neo-Nazism or anti-Semitism, and there really is a toxic thing there. But then you have this crusader defense secretary who's a Christian, professing Christian, has his kids in a Christian school, and I just saw him giving a speech where he said Zionism and Americanism are the two great bulwarks. And that's going to be a little damper on the truly anti-Semitic people, as opposed to people who are accused of being anti-Semitic because they're Christian. Right? We've been catechized. I would say if you're a conservative Christian and you're not accused of racism, you're not being faithful. If you're a faithful Christian, you're going to be accused of being a racist. You're going to be accused of being misogynistic. You're going to be accused of all sorts of things. The one thing we want to make sure is it's not true in God's sight. As if there's any sin there, we don't want God to be condemning us. But I do want the secular world to be condemning us. And it looks like God has given us a gloriously mixed bag. All right. Somebody was telling me, Mike Huckabee being the ambassador to Israel. I mean, for a dispensational Baptist, someone said, that's like winning the Super Bowl. It's like, okay. And that's what, it's all topsy-turvy. And so we have to avoid getting into our narrow little ideological grooves and just enjoy the broad moment, because it's not really a matter of what Trump does. It's a matter of what God's doing in this gloriously chaotic moment. All right?
On that one, I think that's a very complicated one. And I think it's important that we should be seen as anti-Semites by one side and Zionists by the other side. Because Americans should be putting America first, not Israel first, and that's something I see when I come over here. I see a lot of the evangelicals in particular. It's Israel first, and then America. That's very, very strange. But of course, you shouldn't go to the other end of the spectrum where it's hating a people based on their race.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So, put Christ's kingdom first.
We need to be hated by everybody.
Yes.
Well, Calvin, you moved here for one of the main reasons was because you were hated by everybody where you came from, and then you decided to move to Michigan, which
I didn't decide to move. God called me to Michigan.
God called you to Michigan. So God called you from what seems like hostile territory to, at some level, hostile territory.
Yes.
You've been called an Islamophobe, and God called you to Michigan.
Yeah.
So reflect. Why do you think that is? Why do you think?
I don't know.
God takes you from
I was reflecting a little bit on Man Rampant last night, thinking I would have loved to have gone to Texas or Alabama or somewhere very sound, very comfortable. That would have been nice for me. It would have been easy for me. But we're not called to be nice. We're not called to live an easy life. I have stood up against Islamification. I think it's one of the gravest evils of our time. It's pushing on Christendom to erase Christ from our nations. And because I've been a voice in that area, I've happened to have been called to an area where, I mean, there are more Mohammedans in Michigan than there are anywhere else in the United States. And so I don't see that as coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. Right. And the parish that called me to Michigan didn't call me for that reason, but these things all line up. In the United Kingdom, I was put on a hit list by the Mohammedans of the top 10 Islamophobes in the country, essentially putting out a list of people to kill. So it reached that point. So maybe I was taken away from there to fight the same fight, but somewhere else. I'm only speculating. We can only draw conclusions of his plan.
I'd love to hear more. Americans, obviously, we keep an eye on what's going on over there in England, but it's not on our front burner. And hearing you talk about just really the scenario, like London is lost. Could you just paint a picture? Like, tell us how bad it is to kind of steel us against what's coming.
So a friend of mine, Isabel Vaughan Spruce, was one of the first people in the country to be arrested for silent prayer, literal thought crimes, 1984. We have these new things called PSPOs, Public Service Protection Orders, which means that there's a geographical zone around abortion centers. If you are within 150 meters of an abortion center, you cannot harass or intimidate women, fair play. You cannot distribute literature, okay, that's a bit dodgy, and you cannot offer counseling. So you can't go up to these women, these vulnerable women, and say, there's an alternative option. You also cannot pray. And it's explicit in the law, in this new legislation that came into power last month in the United Kingdom, that you cannot pray. And even if it's silent prayer, you don't have to be, they're saying that, they're no longer saying that you can no longer show public signs of prayer. If you are standing there silently in your own head like this, the police will come up to you, they'll read from the script and they'll ask the question, are you praying for the lives of unborn children? And if you are, they arrest you and they'll charge you. Which tells us a couple of things. First and foremost, the enemy understands the power of prayer and does not want us praying. Secondly, that they really want babies to die because they're not offering the conversation. They're not allowed, forget the prayer bit, the literature and the counseling. We're not allowed to say there's an alternative option. We're not allowed to say, we will support you, whether financially, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. We will help you and your baby. That's not allowed because they want the sacrament of Satan, the offering to Moloch. They want that to go ahead more than anything. And this is the evil of the death cult that's taken over. So that's on one end with abortion. On the other end of the spectrum, and this is all down to the death cult, we have a national health service, which I've termed the National Death Service, because it's a socialist system that values human life based on how much a life costs to keep a person keeps alive, or how healthy they are, or how fit they are. So I assume everyone here would say the human life is valuable because in the eyes of God, we have unlimited dignity and worth, and we're all equal in that sense. That's the only sense we're equal, actually. But every human life is sacred because we're made in the image of God. Now, in the secular world, there's none of that. So if you are healthy, you're valuable. If you're not healthy, you're not valuable. It's utilitarian. And so what they've done is, I'll give you one example. There was a young girl called Sudiksha Thormalesh, 19-year-old woman, and she had a degenerative illness. She caught COVID, and it made her illness worse. Now, she was never going to get better. And the doctors said to her, you are actively dying, which, of course, we would all find a strange term because we know that we're all actively dying from the moment we're born, right? It's one thing we all share in common. But the doctor said, you're actively dying. Prepare for that. There's nothing we can do. And so her and her family researched online and they found an experimental treatment in Canada. And the NHS, the National Health Service, said, well, we're not going to pay for that. We're not going to ship you over to Canada for an experimental treatment. It's too expensive. Prepare to die. You are actively dying. And so the family took the NHS to court. Now, the medical doctors, the surgeons said, this patient is delusional because she's not following our advice. That's that God complex right there. Like, we know best, and her life is not valuable. It needs to end. The court said, we'll get you examined. So she had a psychotherapist and psychoanalyst, or anyway, the mind doctors said she's compos mentis. She can make her own mind up. She's a young woman. She's 19 years old. In the UK, if you're 18, you're an adult. And so they gave that to the court. So she's fine. She can make her mind up. The medical doctors said, no, she's clearly delusional. The judge signed with the surgeons and said, you are delusional for not following your doctor's advice. You are actively dying. Prepare to die. And she said, I want to die fighting to live, which I think is the most humane sentence anyone could speak in those circumstances. Now, the court not only said, we're siding with your medical doctors, they said, we're placing a gagging order on you. So you're not allowed to tell anyone about this. And so when it came to us, I was on television at the time, I had my show, and I wanted to talk about this. We were only allowed to refer to her as patient ST, meaning we weren't allowed to ask people to pray for her by name. We weren't allowed to crowdfund for her, to send her over. And in fact, what the courts do in these situations is they take your passport away. So not only do they say, we cannot help you, they say, we're not going to help you, and you're not allowed to get help anywhere else. This is the death cult, the grip that the state has. It is playing God in so many elements of people's lives. These are just two examples. I could sit here and talk to you about these all day, but this is how sad it is when you remove God from the situation. You remove his morality, you remove his definition of what's good and evil, and you just live in death.
And this is an example of he who says A must say B. There's an inexorable trajectory to this, and the root assumptions here, secularism, we don't answer to God, there is no transcendent authority over any of us. Those root assumptions that are stage 4 in the UK are stage 3 here. We've got all the same root assumptions, which is why we need to be challenging the central false claim, which is that we don't answer to God. You know,
Who was it who said if you remove God, like the state becomes the God? If there's no one above
Francis
the state,
Schaeffer.
Right.
If there is no God above the state,
Right.
then the state becomes God.
Right, and that's the UK right now.
Yeah.
Calvin, when you had your show at GB News, you said that your goal in each show was to just clearly articulate the Christian view of X. So there's a current event going on. Yeah. Here's the Christian view of that. I'd love to hear thoughts, and then we'll go to a question just about the value of that the clarity, being able to state clearly the Christian view on things for our allies as well as for the folks who are fighting us.
The value is it smells like burnt marsh wiggle.
Yeah.
We're living in a fog, a dense fog of lie upon lie upon lie, and there's nothing more bracing in a situation like that than someone who's willing to just cut through it and say the truth. And there's that great statement by Solzhenitsyn, live not by lies. That's what we have to do, is summon up the courage, find the courage, recover the courage to challenge lies. Every time you see a lie, put your foot through the side of it. Just, no, we're not going to let you talk that way.
Right. Calvin?
100%. And I think it comes down to common sense. Like, this is why my show was called The Common Sense Crusade, because we do need a new crusade. We also need common sense. Let's have them both at the same time. We've given up a lot of that. You know, we have the power. Not everything needs to be legislated or regulated. Like, we have the power amongst ourselves. Social stigma, shame, they're powerful things. I often say, you know, if a bloke walked into a pub in a dress 50 years ago, the other blokes would have said, what are you doing, mate? Go home, get changed. You look daft. What are you doing?
At least that, yeah,
right.
Sure.
And now it's, we mustn't upset this bloke. He's clearly trans or living in a... It's like, no. Why are we letting people get away with it? Why are we not encouraging each other to live good, ordered lives?
On the lie front, it kind of ties into something you did recently. You dropped a very popular video.
I did, yeah.
Given that you were hitting late night talk show people who do nothing but lie. You put your foot through a particular lie. So
sometimes they cry too.
They cry.
They don't just lie. Yeah.
Why did you do that? Why do you think it just took off like a rocket?
Yeah.
Were you expecting it to?
Well, I talk about those guys a lot, mainly because they're easy targets. But I think they've, to me, stuck out as guys who are hiding their agenda behind. I think they function in a certain way in the country, which is they're sort of a nightly blue pill for everyone, and everybody can sleep a little bit better and have all of their core terrible assumptions confirmed by humor. I just laughed, and so I laughed at all those people. So I must be right. So it was fun to go after them because they were responding in a time where all of their assumptions had come crashing down, and they responded in a way that was not funny at all. At least not funny. They weren't being funny. They weren't trying to be funny. So it was just an easy target, and I think a lot of folks just love when you get to dunk on. Yeah, 5 minutes of dunking on late night hosts. That's a winning formula. I was glad people liked it though.
And I remember a time when liberals could be funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they've completely lost it.
Right.
Gary Trudeau of Doonesbury has a real native sense of humor, which is just gone.
Right.
It's just gone.
Yeah, and I'm a late night fan, so I've watched those guys for a long time, and but yeah, seeing folks who now see their shows as being the place where the world's being saved, it just takes out all the humor. It's the anxiety underneath every joke is just
you know
takes
the
it all
cliche that the left can't meme,
right?
So we're in a golden age of memes. Do you
means
think
we're gonna
those
win.
two things are connected? The late night comedians, memeing is like, it's not just that there's a lot of humor on the right, but it's pretty widespread.
I think John Stott once said, at least one angle on humor. And I've been after Doug to write a book on humor. But the problem is, Doug said, he's like, problem is all the books I've read on humor aren't funny. So I still would like that sometime. But this line from Stott really helped me. He said things are funny because they're abnormal. They don't happen. So he said, a man falling is very funny because man stands upright. Man's not prone to fall. And but that means to be funny, you actually have to know how the world is. You have to know how the world is in order to say something that's contrary to the standard. But if you don't know what the standard is, if you don't know the standard that governs all things and the standard of nature, if you're doing things contrary to nature and trying to pretend that they're normal, it's not funny. You're lost on that particular principle. So
Yeah, observational humor has to have some truth to it, and if they're not speaking any truth, there's no humor there.
Right.
Yeah, if the audience sits up and says, "Oh, that is how things are," then you won. But if they can't, if they're not, unless they live in the same sort of weird bubble, ideological bubble that you do, so they get their audiences to clap along. But that's a different kind of thing. Laughter involuntary, clapping.
Laughter and laugh tracks are not the same thing.
Absolutely. Jake, you got a question?
We good over there?
We have questions in the chat.
Question, maybe for the three pastors, not the regular guy.
Sorry, Wade.
That's quite all right.
I've joined, as a minister, a denomination that is half liberal, half conservative. Apart from what he's read in Rules for Reformers, are there any other thoughts on how to fight the good fight in that context?
Is the liberal half at the top?
You can't have half truth, half lie. You've got to get out of there. It's not true. It's not real. It's not good.
And and I would say that you've got to get out of there, and the only choice is how you will make your exit. Do you see the handwriting on the wall and make your way out, or do you behave in such a way that they show you the way out? But you can. I'd say a faithful minister is always in a position to bring things to a head. And that's what you have to do.
That's it. And I do think ministers are, it's hard. I was just telling you, the young men want to fight. Like young men, it's like another battle, another cultural war, let's go. But I think ministers, you get into the 40s, 50s, and then it's a duty. It's like, there still might be a joy in it if you do it by faith. But you have to be reforming the church, like all the way to the grave. And so if you're going to be in that I'm all for men who want to say, I'm in this particular tradition, this denomination, this convention, and I'm going to labor for reformation. But you have to be honest about whether you're actually doing it or not.
Yeah, are you changing them or are they changing you? And people will argue consistently, well, I'm here to make a difference, but I've got to keep my head down for the time being.
Yeah.
And then when I'm in a position of influence,
Get that ladder climb.
then I've got to climb the ladder. When I get in a position of influence, then I'll make a difference. Well, no. By the time you get there, you will have been so compromised that you'll finally get to the place where you could make a difference, but you don't want to now.
Yeah, the board didn't hire you to act differently than you've been acting the whole time. And so if you get into that presidential position, the board's going to fire you if you act contrary to,
It's a lie. I heard.
And you've seen that.
Oh yeah. When I first got here, I heard a senator speak. I can't remember his name now. He was up in Michigan at the time, saying, when political candidates used to come to him, they used to say, "I'm going to fight the good fight. I won't be compelled to become complicit in all this woke stuff or whatever. I'll fight on this. I'll fight on that." And he always used to ask them, "Where have you ever stood up in the past against your peers?" And if they didn't have an answer, then they weren't ever going to fight, because you know that once they get in, they're going to be leaned on in some way or lobbied in some way, and they will become complicit. But the ones who had fought against their peers, they're the ones who would continue to fight. And so if you're not fighting now, you never will.
Right. Be faithful in a little, you'll be faithful over much.
Yeah.
We got a couple minutes and one more question.
Yeah, last question. Curious as to everyone's thoughts on practical ways to work across denominations to fight back today's wickedness. So cross-denominational work.
You could do things like this.
Do streams. Here we are.
You can do you come to the neighborhood.
We've got an Anglican and Presbyterians and a Pentecostal.
And Mr. Rogers went to seminary with R.C. Sproul.
There you go.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they were seminarians together.
Yes.
So they're
One of the books on the shelves in this house is probably a little Westminster Confession of Faith somewhere.
Oh, shit, it has to be.
Nobody's perfect.
All right, cool. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you guys for sitting down for another episode of Doug Wilson and Friends. Those promos, again, we have the Romans commentary and C.R. Wiley's In the House of Tom Bombadil.
Free on Kindle.
Free on Kindle, so check those out. Thank you again, and we'll see you back in the neighborhood next week.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.